Don't settle for bad socks. Get comfort and grip at an affordable price with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Choose from 18 different colors at puregripsocks.com.
If we take a look at Nike's current football boot lineup, because the Phantom GX just launched in the middle of the World Cup, we likely have at least another year of those before we see anything new. The Nike Mercurial series is likely to be replaced this year since they are running on yearly cycles, but it probably won't be until the end of 2023, which means next in line for a replacement is the Nike Tiempo series. And as we can see on the feet of Virgil van Dijk and Lucy Bronze in training, the Nike Tiempo Legend 10, as it will most likely be called, is coming out relatively soon. With one gigantic change being quite evident here following Nike announcing that there will be no more kangaroo leather football boots from them. As you can see, the next Tiempo will be a full synthetic upper, something we've never seen before. And to be perfectly honest, I'd be lying if I didn't say I'm at least a little disappointed. With that in mind, we're gonna do a little bit of speculating because there are some details here that are pretty obvious, some not so obvious, and effectively I wanna break down more or less what to expect from the next generation of Tiempo. And before we get started, if you guys enjoy these boot spotting videos on the channel and perhaps want to see more, don't forget to drop a like on the video and make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2023. So first things first, easily the biggest change to this next generation Tiempo is the upper, mainly that it will not be made from kangaroo leather or natural leather at all for that matter. It will be a full synthetic construction, which is crazy considering that every Tiempo Legend model 1 through 9 has featured a majority kangaroo leather upper. And this shouldn't be too surprising given that Nike did recently announce that they will no longer be producing kangaroo leather football boots. And there's a bunch of reasons for this I really don't want to get into in this video, but it does appear to be the direction that pretty much every brand is going into, especially considering that Puma with their new King Ultimate model has gone from kangaroo leather into a full synthetic, and even Adidas has transitioned their Copa series, not the Copa Mundial of course, but the modern Copa lines away from kangaroo leather and into calfskin, where I can almost guarantee you that the next generation will probably trend towards being full synthetic as well. With that in mind, Nike does have a pretty incredible track record of making some of the best synthetic football boots ever. So in the case of this next generation Tiempo, while I think it's hard to call it a Tiempo if it's not going to feature kangaroo leather, I am hopeful that it's going to feel pretty good. And on that topic, maybe it's best to look at this next generation Tiempo as kind of the return of the CTR 360 Maestri series, boots that featured a Kangalite synthetic material, which was designed to mimic the feel and touch and comfort of kangaroo leather. Not to say that this is for sure going to be a Kangalite upper, but I can only assume it's going to be something along those lines. And honestly, if we look back at the CTR 360 Maestri 3, that's a synthetic upper that honestly still holds up really well. As for what to expect from a feel standpoint from this synthetic Tiempo, I don't think it's going to feel quite like natural kangaroo leather. That's incredibly difficult to imitate when it comes to pliability, touch on the ball, and just general comfort. This likely won't stretch like any leather Tiempos have in the past. With that said, you can make out some very deep grooves kind of cutting through the entire upper, which I think are going to act as flex grooves and also indicate that this material does have some decent thickness to it. So instead of having a super thin barefoot feel like so many football boots tend to have these days, it is a little bit hopeful at least that this does appear to be a somewhat padded upper, which I think is pretty important if they're going to call this a Tiempo. Leather should have a little bit of a padded feel, and that does appear to be the case here. It'll also be really cool to see if they bring back Kangalite as a material in general. I felt like that was a material that was marketed really well back when it was a prominent element within Nike's brand, both on the CTR 360 line as well as on the Tiempo series. If we look back at the Tiempo Legend 3 Elite, that featured a Kangalite upper. If we look at the Legend 4, that featured a Kangalite element through the midfoot, and same thing goes for the Nike Tiempo Legend 5. Kangalite was prominently used throughout the Tiempo series, but never as a main upper material. As for other design elements of the upper, the laces still run directly down the middle, and it looks like it has somewhat of a one-piece enclosure where it's some kind of a textile, most likely a fly knit, kind of filling in the top portion of the foot where a tongue would normally be. Given that the Tiempo has kind of had this one-piece upper construction for a couple generations now, that's not too surprising, but you'll also notice through the heel area, just the way that it's edged, given that it does maintain its low-cut construction, it goes away from the more traditional heel construction of the Tiempo Legend 9 and more of kind of the sock boot type construction of the Tiempo Legend 8, which personally I don't love, but at the same time, I think if they get the shaping right and put the right amount of padding with the correct liners, you can still end up with something that fits really well and is ultimately really comfortable. Personally though, I like the traditional direction that the Tiempo Legend 9 and its heel went with. Beyond that, I'm sure there will be some level of micro texturing on the upper, even though you can't really see it within these images. And as far as ACC all conditions control is concerned, they really didn't make a big deal about it on the Tiempo Legend 9, but given that they are going away from kangaroo leather and into a synthetic, I can only assume that it's going to be a bigger part of the marketing of the Legend 10, and they're probably going to have some kind of new technology, most likely, that will justify the change away from natural leather and into a synthetic. Because let's be honest, even if the boots are really good, there's going to be a lot of angry longtime Tiempo fans. As for the sole plate and stud pattern, I honestly wouldn't expect any big changes given that this is still a Tiempo Legend model. The blades under the heel and the conical studs in the forefoot is kind of the Tiempo's thing, so I assume that will be maintained. We can see Van Dyke is actually wearing a firm ground pair where again, stud pattern looks pretty similar to what we have right now, where Lucy Bronze is actually wearing a soft ground pair, which does appear to have the same anti-clog sole plate that they're currently offering on all their other SG Pro options. So I wouldn't be too surprised, honestly, if the tooling from the current Legend 9 carried over into the Legend 10, but I'm sure they'll also make some very subtle tweaks. Nonetheless, I wouldn't expect too much as far as groundbreaking technology is concerned. The majority of the focus is going to be on the upper. What is also a possibility, but at the same time I think pretty unlikely, is Nike's recent success of the reintroduction of Air Zoom tech in the Mercurial series could potentially find its way into the Tiempo lineup, given that they did pull on the heritage of Air Zoom being used in past Mercurials, which it also was in the Tiempo Legend 1 and 2 with a little zoom unit underneath the heel. I honestly doubt this is going to happen. I feel like this is a technology that they're going to leave exclusive for the Mercs, but if they implemented something similar on the Tiempo series, I think that could only be a really good thing, but unfortunately from these images, that's something that would be inside of the boot and pretty much impossible to tell if it's there. But like I said, I doubt it. And then the last thing that I think is worth speculating about is the final weight of the Tiempo Legend 10. We've kind of been brainwashed by Nike as well as pretty much every brand that leather is a heavier material than synthetic. And given that the Tiempo Legend 10 versus the 9 is going from leather to synthetic, I would think that they're going to promote that this new synthetic upper is lighter than what they were using before. But here's the thing, the Tiempo Legend 9 is already quite light, and as has been disproven on this channel using a normal scale countless times, leather isn't actually that heavy a material, and the argument that leather absorbs more water than synthetic, while that can be true in a lot of cases, leather technology has changed quite significantly in the last 10 to 15 years, where realistically, that's not a huge issue anymore. It doesn't absorb as much water as leather boots once did. So I don't necessarily see them shaving a lot of weight off the current Tiempo given how light it already is, but it's definitely a possibility that they'll go with the lightweight speed direction in the Tiempo Legend 10 versus what they did in the Legend 9, where the story was also kind of about the boots being lighter than they'd ever been before. Which leaves us with the final two questions that I'm sure a lot of you have, and that is, how much are they going to cost and when are they coming out? As far as pricing is concerned, the current retail price of the Tiempo Legend 9 Elite is $230. So at the very least, I expect the Tiempo Legend 10 to cost that much. And I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people screaming in the comments saying that if they're going to take away the leather and give us a synthetic upper, they should cost less. And I personally agree with that, although it's really difficult to speculate on the cost of materials with any of these big brands. Whether or not going from leather to synthetic is a sneaky cost-cutting measure. That remains to be seen, but what has kind of happened in the football boot industry over the last 10 years or so is leather boots have gone from being kind of the most expensive to the least expensive. So if anything, and I know a lot of you guys are gonna hate that I'm about to say this, I wouldn't be surprised if the Tiempo Legend 10 made the price jump from $230 to $250, matching the Vapor 15 and the Phantom GX. And then as far as the release date is concerned, Nike tends to drop boots in the summertime, typically mid-summer, so I would guess anywhere between late June to early August is more than likely when we're going to get an official release date and unveiling of the Tiempo Legend 10. But that's it for me in this one. Let me know your thoughts on the Tiempo Legend 10 and the leather to synthetic direction that Nike seems to be going in. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Why or why not? I'm really curious to read your comments on this upcoming release. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one.